Hi everyone, this is Shannon Williams from Rancher. Welcome to today's Rancher overview training. Today we're going to be doing about an hour of training on Rancher to help people understand how to get it set up, how to use it, and how to deploy it in a way that is that's easy to get connected to all of your internal services and get people started with the process of Dockerizing their applications. So just a quick round of introductions. I'm Shannon. I'm one of the founders here at Rancher and run our marketing and sales team. And with me today is Denise Schannon, our support manager. Denise, you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Great.
Hi, everyone.
Denise is going to be providing a demonstration and answering a lot of your technical questions as we go. But just a little bit of quick overview on what we're trying to accomplish today. It's really meant to be a technical introduction to Rancher. We want people to come in, regardless of your level of understanding, and walk away, with a good knowledge of how to do, all of the core basic functionality within Rancher. We're going to try and keep this to mostly demonstration and keep everything in the command line or on the UI of the product. We really don't want to spend a lot of time on slides. So we're going to cover a few things here at the beginning, and then I'm going to hand it over to Denise, and she's going to dive into the content. But that means is just keep demoing. So we're going to demo all of these functionality. If there's something you want to see that we haven't covered, just ask. We can keep going a little bit long if we need to get into any content that maybe you've tried or you've hit a bug or a snag and things are going. As always, questions are welcome. So if you look, everyone's line is muted. You'll notice though there's a questions tag within the GoToMeeting product, GoToWebinar product, so you can fill in your questions. As those come in, I'll be monitoring them. I'll either respond directly, or Denise will respond directly, or we'll read them out and maybe chat about them a little bit if the question we think is sort of globally relevant. We will be here as long as we need to. So if you've got questions or you need to see something or you're hitting a specific issue, we can discuss it. We're also happy to open up your audio line if you want to just talk a bit and explain the problem you're facing. If it's a little more complex, just mention that in the questions, and we'll open it up so you can chat. Okay, so a couple things we want to just cover before we dive into the core meat. If you're going to be using Rancher, you definitely need to take a look at the docs. It's a pretty simple product to get started with, but there's a lot of depth and complexity hidden behind the simple UI. So if you're stuck, you're not quite clear on how to do something, you can really very quickly understand the core capabilities of Rancher by diving into our docs. You can look at things like installation and how to configure Rancher, but also you'll see lots of information on kind of how Rancher works, how we do things like HA for containers, what does networking look like, how does the orchestration work, how does the catalog work, and if you want to even get involved with contributing to the open source project, you're more than welcome to do that. Beyond that, there is there's a great forums section where you can dive in and go through getting help. This is available at forums.rancher.com. We post all new releases into the announcements tag, so if you haven't already done that, join. We release product almost every week or every other week as we're going through the beta, so you'll be able to see the latest release of Rancher. I think we're currently on 44. As well as ask any questions that you're interested in the Rancher or Rancher OS forum category. So we monitor these, but there's also a lot of people from the community who are in there answering questions. Great place to get help, so definitely please hit that. Okay, so the things we're going to try to cover today, just in case you have questions and we may not have addressed it already, we're going to be going through how to set up Rancher, how to connect it to your access control system. We'll talk through the process of creating environments, areas where people can deploy Rancher and get it working with a set of resources that they need. So we'll talk about hosts and adding hosts, and we'll talk about registries. We'll go through, using Docker Hub, using private Docker Hub, or any other private container registry. We'll talk about the UI, API, CLIs, and how you can use all of these to talk to Rancher, as well as just talking natively through Docker's API. or command line. We'll go through, the basics of launching containers, stacks, and services. We'll talk about compose files and our new Rancher catalog. And then, we'll talk about some of the more complex configurations of applications like load balancing, setting up services, external services, and how to deploy, how Rancher networking sort of works on the back end. So lots that we've got to cover, but hopefully it should give you, an ample introduction to Rancher. So I'm going to now turn it over to Denise. Denise, if you're all set, I'm going to pass you the ball, and you can start the process of sharing Rancher.
I'm ready whenever you are.
You should have it.
Okay.
I can see your screen.
Perfect. Okay, let's get started. So I'm going to actually start at the docs site just because that's usually the best place, I feel like, for new users to get started. Basically, under our installing Rancher section, we have a very, I think, pretty in-depth way of explaining all the different ways that someone might want to install Rancher. So we have in our single node, so that's basically, one installation of Rancher. We have, our most basic use case, which is just using the Rancher server container. We have different ways if you want to, for authentication, we provide LDAP, connecting with LDAP, and then you might want to, connect over TLS, so then you have to start Rancher actually with a certificate. If you want to, the Rancher server container has a MySQL database, but if you wanted to bind mount the MySQL volume or use an external database, we go over those details. So those are and then also how to do it over a proxy. So those are some of the ways that you might want to start Rancher server. So I always recommend people looking at the docs. If you wanted to do a multi-node setup, so if you had multiple instances of Rancher running, we have our use case of how we've tested it out. As we get closer to GA, we're going to be simplifying it. So, look forward to that. And then we have if you want to install it with SSL. And then also there's a couple people out there we know that, want to use Rancher server without internet access. And so basically, how could you use your own private registry to run Rancher, as well as if you wanted to use it behind a proxy. So those are all the things. So the couple of things I did before my demo to just get set up was I started up some boxes on GCE. I have one that has Rancher server actually already running. So all I've done is I just did the most basic command to start up Rancher server, which is outlined over here. And then I have it up and running. You can see I only made it about 48 minutes ago. And then I have 3 other boxes that the only thing I've done here is I pre-pulled some images, which is something you do not have to do. It's just I do it for the sake of the demo to just speed it up. Or I pre-pulled some images so that when I launch things in Rancher, it won't have to spend the time for my demo to actually download those images. So let's get into Rancher. So once you have installed Rancher, what you do is you can go to the IP address, and at port 8080 is where we expose the UI. And here, if you go here, when you first log in, it'll give you this welcome screen of basically, how to add your first host and adding your first service. But usually what I always like to recommend people to do is you should always turn on access control first. So right now, as you can see, there's a big red warning to say access control is not configured. That basically means that anyone who has access to your IP also has access to essentially your API and a Rancher server and can do anything to your Rancher server. So the first thing I'll click on is settings. You can see in this admin tab, that's where we control access control. We support 3 different types of access control or authentication. We have GitHub, you can do LDAP, or you could do local. So local just means it's, you're storing an internal database of users in Rancher itself if you didn't want to connect to any of those. So I'm going to use this internal one real quick. I'm going to make a username of admin1. I'll place myself as the admin, put in a password, and I'm going to turn on local auth. So basically now, all those people who previously had access to my IP address and could have accessed my Rancher server are now kind of locked out and would get a, not have the ability to log into my my Rancher server. So then the next thing that you could do right after that would be probably to, you could manage your environment. That is basically different sets of resources that you might want to manage individually. So this, you're automatically logged into a default environment. Any hosts that you add into your environment would be segregated from other environments. So you could add environments for different labs. For each environment, you can see who should the members of that environment be. If you invite someone to Rancher and they create their own environment, as an admin user, you'd be able to see it, but outside of that, regular users wouldn't be able to see that. So as the different role levels for an environment itself are owner, so an owner basically can control the membership level of an environment. A member just basically has access to it. They wouldn't be able to add or remove any members. And then read only. So when we've had some people ask for this role where basically they want people to be able to see what's going on in their environment but not actually touch or play with anything. So that's the way you can add environments. And then I'm going to go back to this admin tab real quick and talk about the accounts. So the environment is what you can use to kind of segregate out people from your different resources or your hosts that you have and containers from different sets of people. And then you could also add in different accounts of those who have access to Rancher. So, I could add Shannon to here, use one of the generate our password. I can add him as a user to Rancher or an admin to Rancher. Basically, whoever the first person turns on access control ends up being the first admin of the of it and has the ability to access this admin tab, which allows you to add accounts, change people from users to admins. You get to, decide what the access control is. We'll go over what host registration is in a little bit, but only an admin can change that. And then you'll have this page of processes. Let me just save this real quick. And the processes is a really good debugging tool where if you run into issues with Rancher, you can see all the processes that are running. You can see I don't have anything going on now because all of mine have already exited.
Hey, Denise, before you move on from this, there was a question that came in about where you should install Rancher. So the question was, should I install Rancher on my notebook or on a bare metal server PC? And I think in general, where you deploy Rancher, tends to have to do with what the use case is. If you're going to be running Rancher, at a large scale, you're definitely going to want to put it on a server with some reasonable capacity. It's generally not meant to be a single, user interface for your local machine. So, we typically suggest people install Rancher on a VM or on a host that they're going to be deploying containers on. But it's really up to you. I mean, you can run Rancher anywhere as long as it has internet access and you're able to access it, and it's able to then have access to the host that it's controlling. So we'll talk in a minute about adding hosts, but generally, if you're going to be running on bare metal hosts, I would run Rancher there, not on your local notebook. Anything you'd add to that, Denise?
No, I think that's a great summary. I mean, it's really, I know a lot of people when they first start out, they're just testing out Rancher. They'll deploy it locally just to play around with it. But like once you actually start inviting other users, obviously you'll need to put it in a place where other people could access it as well. Okay, so I'm going to move on to adding some hosts because, let's get to to be able to deploy our services, we're going to have to first add some hosts where our containers can actually get launched on. So as you can see, the first thing will happen when I click on infrastructure add host is I got bumped to this host registration page. So really this is where you define what the URL should be for how your Rancher host should connect to Rancher server. So when the concept of adding a host is really all you're doing is launching a Rancher agent container, and that container itself has all the workings of what it needs to do to be able to communicate between, Rancher, between the host and the Rancher server itself. So for me, I'm just gonna, I'll keep it simple. I just have it set as my IP. You can save it, and then you'll immediately get put to the add host page. And so what happens is all we're doing here is, I know a lot of people always ask questions and want additional features added in, is really we're really using Docker Machine, and we've just created this lovely UI to be able to launch Docker Machine on these cloud providers. And so a lot of times People have requests that will come in that are not supported in Docker Machine yet, so that's unfortunately something that we can't support yet either ourselves. But the good thing is, anytime something gets added to Docker Machine, we quickly evolve and add that in and add that latest version of Docker Machine into Rancher Server. So I'm going to first launch a couple of things using DigitalOcean, so you can see what it is. I've copied and pasted my access token previously. I'm going to change the size. Here you can see how many hosts. I like to usually, for my demo, run about 3 of them, just because sometimes if you've played with Docker Machine yourself, sometimes there are some issues with Docker Machine and cloud providers. Just the cloud providers having issues. Maybe the region is not going great. I'm near California, so I like to put San Francisco. And then I'm going to add a couple labels to my host, which I'll use in a little bit to show you how scheduling of Rancher works. So let me see. I'm going to add a WordPress label. You could add whatever you want. I could add my database labels. It's just setting up a key value pair onto those. So now what's happening is we've called Docker Machine. It's launching something through Docker Machine. It's going to contact DigitalOcean. It's going to create the droplet in DigitalOcean. It's then going to SSH into that droplet, and then it will download and install Rancher Agent, the specific command needed, so that it can then start communicating back with Rancher Server. So as this goes on, this is going to take a couple minutes just because of all those steps. I also have a couple of hosts on GCE already. And so here the custom, if you have your bare metal servers that you want to add onto Rancher Server, if you have other things, you can use this custom. Maybe you have something that locally that you don't want to use any of these cloud providers. This is where you go to the custom tab and get the command to run Rancher Agent. Here you can also add some host labels. So I'm going to add a couple for my my blog, my app that I'm going to show you in a little bit. And as you can see, we're just adding some host labels into the command, and it automatically edits the command so that it captures the labels that you've done. So basically, this command that you see here is essentially one of the steps in when we deploy one of the servers, one of the hosts on the cloud providers. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go to my terminal where I have those three GCE instances up and running already. I'm going to run it, and since I've already pre-populated with the images, it starts running pretty quickly. Close this, and we'll see them pop up quite quickly over here. And there they start to go. You can see my different hosts coming up. So after we get our hosts running, I'll let these run while we start setting up our services. I'm going to go back to the applications page, and we'll start adding our services. So you can add individual services. I'll show you a couple of my services, and then I'll go over what the new feature from the catalog is in a little bit. Oh, I see this. Okay, so when we add our services, the first one I'm going to do is just to show you a simple what happens when we add a service. We expose a port, and how you can see that service, that container onto that host. So let's see if we go.
Hey Denise, before we add a container, there was a question about what operating systems and stuff are supported on a host. So someone asked about Arch Linux being supported. Is that something that right now, as far as host support goes, it's really anywhere that you can run Docker. So as long as Docker, a reasonably modern version of Docker is supported, like 1.6, and we can deploy a Rancher agent on it, it should work fine as a host. I don't know about Arch off my head. Do you know if that's supported?
I don't know off my head if that one is something that isn't supported. I know usually it is anything that runs Docker. I cannot recall exactly which operating system. There's one that we haven't tested, so it doesn't work. But it's not a very common one. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. But so until you could try it, I guess, and see if that works. I apologize. I mean, I've never tested myself, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. So it's kind of, if Docker runs on it, there's no reason why it shouldn't work. So I'm going to move on. I was just thinking about just how to incorporate one of our most recent features into this. So I will see if I can do this, but let's first go and let's launch my blog. I'm going to use this container called Ghost, which is a simple blogging service. I'm going to expose the port 2368, which is the port that is exposed in the container. I'm just going to expose it onto the host. I've decided that I want to run 3 containers on it, and so by now I should have about probably 6 hosts running, and I actually only want these containers running on my host that I put that ghost equals true label on it. And so here I've gone to the scheduling section, and I can say this is how you can define where you want your containers of your service to be deployed. And here I want where the host must have a host label of where ghost equals true. So here it pre-populates, what are all the different labels you have available. You can create rules based on host labels. You can add in labels on containers, so then you could schedule them according to which containers are on a host, which services or container names that are existing. There's a whole, it's kind of like the world is your oyster if you really wanted to get really fancy of labels, host labels, container labels, names of how you want to decide where to schedule your containers. I kind of briefly went over it, but a service is really just a group of containers. They're all the same image. It's just multiple of them. You could always have a single service, which would just be one container. The scheduling rules allowed you to do affinity and soft affinity rules as well. And so, it kind of mimics what you can do with Docker Swarm. Basically, because the service is just launching a container, any options that you can do on a Docker run command, we support in the UI as well. We have under command, volumes, networking, and security hosts, all these 4 tabs should be able to provide you with all the options that you can find in a Docker run command. The specific rancher options that we added in are health checks. So you could add a health check to your container, where basically if the container stops, for some reason, either the host is unreachable, all different scenarios of where you would say, okay, that container is no longer reachable for some reason. Let me make sure that my scale of 3 that I've declared is always at 3 running active containers. You could do that as well. You could have different, how often do we check it? When do we time out? What we consider the thresholds of what's healthy and unhealthy. Labels is something kind of rancher specific, where you can add different labels to be able to do those scheduling rules. We have a bunch of other system labels, or that's what we call them, where you could do things in using Rancher Compose with these system labels that we are in the process of adding into the UI directly, so that those special labels that I'll go over in a little bit, you could also do here. And then we've already covered over the scheduling. I'm going to get this started and get this deployed. I'm going to say create. First, it's just going to create the service for me. Oh, sorry about that. This port is required. Oh, I know. I apologize for that. That's because I had done this. You can see, obviously, there's an error there that I didn't notice. I'm going to take off my health check. I should have exit out. Apologies real quick. I'm just going to set this up again. I'll have to look into that a little bit later to see why the error just didn't error out. Now, I know what I did was I quickly went over it, is that I forgot to actually link my service to expose the ports like I wanted to. So one of the things is, like, if you do something like I did where you made a mistake and you want to be able to actually redo this, but I don't want to go through all the steps, you can always take a service that you have existing, you can clone it. And here I can just add in my port that I need. So it has to be a unique service name. Let's delete this one. Let's get this started. Here you can see quickly these will get up and going. As you can see, the stack, this is kind of a newer feature that we just re-enabled. For a little bit it was disabled, where if you have any services in your stack that are not active or in a different state, they'll go into a degraded state. And so that it's great when you have lots of stacks to be able to monitor and see what's going on with your services in the stack. I know a lot of questions that some people have are usually, what are stacks? Stacks are just ways of how we group your services. So you might want to group them by application. It's really just an organization tool as the user of how you want to do it. There's nothing that restricts you from a stack specifically, so it's really up to how you as a user want to handle them. Now I'm going to just go into one of my containers here. You can see it's up and running. We show all these statistics that we get from the container itself. I'm going to copy this host IP, bring it over here, copy it over, go to that port that I exposed on that host. It'll bring me directly into the Ghost container that we have running. And so you can see that my platform is running.
So Denise, when you had that degraded tag there, one of the first people on the meetup was asking what that meant. Do you want to just explain the concept of degraded as you were going through that?
Yep. I tried to describe it, but I probably went through it a little quickly. So basically, it'll be easier in this view. So if I, essentially, as long as some of it is that if all your services that are in your stack are active, then you'll be in an active state. If there are any issues with your stack, so if I stop this, this will, this one became degraded, and so the stack is considered degraded. If I add another service and I haven't started it, so I have this inactive service on my stack, that will cause a stack to be degraded. And so really when you start to have, if you imagine if you have lots and lots of applications running and lots of different stacks to be able to organize it, it's an easy way as an admin, as a user of Rancher to be able to see which stack might have a service that's has an issue or problem that I need to go investigate. So that's really what the degraded status means.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem. So then, let's see. I'm going to add another stack. I'm going to do my load balancing test stack and create it. I'm going to first add a service of, call it my app, and I'm going to use a individual, my coworker's image, which is just taking a NGINX container, NGINX image, and all it's doing is it's creating an extra URL that will actually spit out what the container ID is. It doesn't have the fanciest name, but that's okay with me. I'm going to schedule it on all the hosts that already have my app equals true, because those are the hosts that I pre-populated with it just to get it running faster. And I will, I'm going to run like 8 of these. I'm going to create these. I'm going to start it. And while it starts, I'm going to go to the infrastructure page so you can see what's going on here. As you can see, the difference on the host, the stacks are separated out so that you can easily see which containers are part of what stack on a host. You can see that across these 3 hosts that have my app equals true label, that's where all these app ones, you can see that there's nothing on my DigitalOcean host yet, because I'm going to put some things on there that I haven't pre-populated images on there so that you can see kind of what the expected speed to be when you deploy something when you don't pre-populate an image. And so now you can see that I have 3 of these containers running. I'm going to go back to my stack. I'm going to add a load balancer service. I will run 3 of these on port 80. I'm going to target that application that I had. 4 targets for load balancing. Right now I'm just using a really basic L4 load balancing. I know there are people who are interested in L7 load balancing, which allows you to do request host, ports, certain paths, target ports, different variations. So those, we do have that ability. That's just under the advanced, close this. Oh, can't go back to see it, but it's under the advanced routing options. For load balancer, we also allow, so you could do SSL if you needed, and if you do that, you'll need to pick certificates. Certificates can be added up under the infrastructure tab. You can choose the stickiness. You can add labels, because a load balancer service is just, you know, another container that's going to be running the HA proxy software on it. And you can schedule where these go. So I'm going to pick that, you know, I'm going to pick up these 3 containers. Go on, I'm going to pick this, my DigitalOcean host that I know are this, that have this label of DB equals true. I'm going to save that. And I should put a name to it and save that. And so I'm going to, here you can see immediately that the link to my misspelled application here is automatically created. And then if I start it, start going. So basically the link knows that, you know, this load balancer is going to redirect all the traffic to this app itself. So you can see that this one is actually taking a lot longer than the other ones, because since I've added it onto my DigitalOcean hosts that don't have anything pre-populated, the very first thing that's going to happen is it's going to download this network agent. The network agent is just another Rancher agent specific container. It's called Rancher agent instance. And what that does is that's how we communicate between the different hosts. I can show you real quick. Let's pick one here while that's running, where even though these hosts are not, these containers are not on the same host, I can ping the container. I've taken the network agent IP address of this network agent on, I think it's my demo host 1. I executed the shell from my network agent container of my demo host 2. I should be able to ping it. Be a small delay for the first ping, and then afterwards we'll recognize that the connection is made and start bringing the traffic back and forth. Now you can see all my load balancer agents are up and running. So since we know that this load balancer agent is on this host, you can pick it, take that host IP. If I go directly to just 80, it should redirect us. It will take a little bit because of that delay when it starts to set up the traffic, but it should redirect us to one of our applications, and it should come up with the Nginx container. Service unavailable. So let's see. So this is great. This is a great troubleshooting activity. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's exec into one of these and see if I can ping my container that's on another host. And it's not coming through. Okay, so for some reason my DigitalOcean hosts currently are unable to ping between each other. I have to think a little bit about why that might be. I can go back. I'll go back and show you in the Rancher documentation. We have this troubleshooting, frequently asked questions. I can go over all different types of reasons that we've seen lots of people ask, you know, these things don't happen and what we've done to help them. I'm going to go into this cross-host communication to see what is going on. I don't know if there's anything in there from my memory that I can think of. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually, just for the demo's sake, I'll have to look into this. I'm going to stop this load balancer. I'm going to clone it. There's going to be some UI issues I know are going to come out. I'm actually just going to say you should not go on any of those. Actually, you know what? I'll do this. Let's add a load balancer. I'm going to add it to 480. And I'm going to pick a host that where ghost equals true. So I'm going to start there and just get it going. Get this one up. This one should pick one of the hosts. Where is it? Excuse me. This is okay. Maybe I just couldn't see it. So the load balancer agent is running up and running on one of my hosts. Oh, I apologize because I wasn't looking. It's right here. You can see it's on this host right here. If I go to this host, I take the host IP and I go to URL. This should connect to my nginx container. So this is picking one of those 8 containers of that service that I created earlier. If I click refreshing, all you would see is the same page over and over again, which isn't really helpful in a demo. But if I go to that special URL that I was telling you about, you can see that the container ID of that we're accessing is now being shown. And if I click on refresh, it will cycle through all the different containers. Sometimes there's a small delay as the traffic, the overlay network, the first ping between the two are going, get set up. You can see that these are all container IDs. Now, if for some reason you didn't believe that these were, valid container IDs, I don't know why you wouldn't believe me, but maybe you don't. We can do a Docker PS to see, which host. So this is a C85. Not on my demo agent 3. I don't see it in any of my containers. Let's go over here. Let's see. C85 is not on my host 2. And here on host 1, on the demo agent 1, you can see that that is where that one is. So right now the HA proxy 8D04, probably on another one. Let's see, and here's 8D04. Right now the HA proxy software that we use for our load balancer is just doing a round robin algorithm. So it'll just go through between those 3 different, not 3, excuse me, those 8 different containers. So that's really how you can use the UI. There are a couple other things in the UI you can use adding service alias. You can add external service. So if you wanted to point to something that's outside of Rancher, that's really how you can use the UI. So I just want to cover over, how are the other ways that people can use Rancher. I'm going to delete this one real quick so that that degraded status will go away. So the UI is just basically calling anything in the API. So anything that you wanted to be able to do that you see available in the UI is something available and exposed in our API. So the API itself you can find under here. For every single environment, there's a specific API endpoint that you can go to. And here you can see I can click into it. And with access control on, you can see that I have access to my API immediately because I'm already logged in. But if I go and take this endpoint to a different browser that I'm not logged into, it'll ping me and say, what's your name and password or your API access key and secret key into here. And so if I wanted to access that, I could create an API key, secret key into here, log in, and now I will have access into my API. So that's how the security of your API, because access control is on, no one else can access it unless they're either a member of Rancher, so they could log in themselves, or you could provide them with an API key directly. Close this. So let's go actually back to our API itself. So here you can see all the different objects that you can create and do. We currently are in the process of documenting our API so that it's a little more user-friendly. But basically right now we're in what in the API called a project. That's actually an environment in our UI. You can see how, let's see if I can, apologize because I'm not the greatest user of the API. Here under services, you can see we have these different services already running in our environment. I can add, create another service here. I can pick what type of service. Excuse me, I can pick the name. I'd have to put in a launch config, which I believe is just, it's, all the container options in a JSON file. And then I could show the requests. Here you can see what are the different commands that you would be able to do to use our API if you were doing some scripting. So let's get out of that unless there are more questions. But I'm going to go, I want to jump into Rancher Compose, which is a great tool that we provide. So Rancher Compose is basically, it's kind of on top of Docker Compose, where if you're not familiar, so in Docker Compose, in the Docker repo, there's a project called libcompose, which is essentially the Go interpretation of what Docker Compose is written on. That's something that us at Rancher had contributed heavily on because, we had already created this Go implementation for us to support Rancher Compose, and so we contributed back to the Docker community. I'm going to download Rancher Compose. And what you can do is you can take with Rancher Compose, you can take a Docker Compose YAML file, run a Rancher Compose up with that file, and basically it will deploy it into your Rancher server instance. I've downloaded the latest one, I've opened it, and you can see here the Rancher Compose version for this server version is version 5.1. I'm going to, let's navigate into that terminal, that binary, so we can start using it. So one thing to point out is Rancher Compose, if you're not, if you don't know how to get started, we have this great documentation of how to use it. It goes over it pretty in depth, just, because we know users probably aren't familiar with it. You can see here I just have my binary out there. So I'm going to go back to pick out a simple Docker Compose file. So here, if you used to launching things, say you want to first get started off with a UI, you can launch it here. In the stack view, we provide this view where you can see the different compose files that you could copy and paste to be able to create this into using Rancher Compose. So here I'm just going to create a Docker Compose file. I'm going to copy what I have over there. I'm going to create a Rancher Compose file, which is just, these are the Rancher specific items that, Docker Compose doesn't support. The great thing is that, if you have this Docker Compose file, you could always run Docker Compose up on it directly. I'm going to change the scale of this to 5, just so you can see, the difference. And here I'm going to run my command. The way you communicate between, my command line and Rancher is that, you'd have to provide what the URL is. You can pass it in either through the command line, or you could set up environment variables onto your host, your machine. The reason why I don't usually set environment variables is I'm always using different instances of Rancher server, and so for me, environment variable is not very helpful since I would always have to be resetting them. So I usually just pass in, the URL, the access key, and secret key. So the reason why we have to pass in the access key and secret key is the whole reason we talked about before, where access control we've eliminated and not allowed people to use this API unless you have, an access key and secret key. I'm going to call this project my compose test up, and then I'll do an up. Let's see, while that goes, if we can see it. Here you can see my compose test. You can see that my application is already started up quite quickly, and then it's going to start activating my load balancer. So there was a quick demonstration of how you can use Rancher Compose. With Rancher Compose, there's lots of commands that we mimic what you can do in Docker Compose. You can upgrade services. You can I mean, you can do all kinds of things with Rancher Compose. I'm rushing a little bit just because I'm aware of the time and I want to start going into one of our more recent great features. Another way to use Rancher Compose, if you have your files and say you don't want to use the command line and you are more used to the UI, this is something I know Shannon loves to do, is you can add a stack, put in those Docker and Compose and Rancher Compose files directly, and create a stack which would automatically create your services into a stack directly. Go out of that real quick. So one of our most recent features that we've just released is this catalog. So catalog, what we've done is we've taken some probably a little more complicated templates that are out there of how would you get this set up maybe in Rancher and put them into so that you could launch, you could pick a template from here and launch it directly into a stack yourself. I have only really played recently with a couple of them. I can show you, the cool things that we can do. So here, you can pick a template. You would be able to see the different versions available. I'm going to pick an older version so that we could see a couple of the cool things that we have out here. Name it, and then I'm going to create it. So the cool thing is, you can see that here in the configuration options, all you have to do is do a cluster name. You can pick the version. And then if you wanted to see the complex before you deployed it, what is going on behind the scenes, you can expand this preview button, and you can see the Docker Compose YAML file that we've created as a template, and the corresponding Rancher Compose that allows us to be able to launch this, create this stack. So I'm going to start it up, and here you can see we've created all the things. We've created all the services related to be able to do an Elasticsearch. Now, one of the things the reason why I picked that older version is that here you can see what we also do in Rancher is if you created a template and a newer version of that template comes available, it can allow you to upgrade that. So let's start. I'm going to start our services first. And then here the upgrade available is actually a button. So I'm going to wait until our services are going, and then I'm going to push the button, and then we can go through the different steps and kind of states that occur when you do an upgrade. I guess I'll pause here while I wait for this to get up and going, Shannon, to see if there are any questions out there. Okay, I see that there's one question out there.
Yeah, Denise, the questions that was asked, it was asked, there's an earlier part of the question that I had answered directly, but the question was about where to place the load balancers and how load balancers work with sort of DNS.
I can go over the DNS feature we just added as well. So in this most recent release, literally, it was released on Tuesday, we added a DNS service to Rancher. And so I don't know if that will answer the question directly. So while this is going,
this question, actually, I think the question here is a little, I mean, I think it'd be really cool to cover that, but I think the question here was more about how do, if I'm running a load balancer, should I run it, where should I actually deploy it? How many should I deploy? Why would I deploy more than one? So if you're in this case, the person's DNS is pointing to only one IP, how could there be multiple load balancers? So I think that that makes perfect sense. If you're just going to set up a DNS to point to a single IP, then you definitely don't want to use multiple load balancers. The case with multiple load balancers is if you're using a DNS service that allows multiple IPs, that does round robin DNS. So if you're using something like Amazon Route 53 or Cloudflare, there's these DNS services that allow you to register multiple IP addresses as part of a service, and then they monitor the health of those load balancers. And that way you can cluster load balancers in the same way you cluster application services. You run 4 or 5 load balancers. All of those are globally part of the DNS entry for mysite.com, and mysite.com shifts acts as sort of a global load balancer for that service, and then it passes them to the different IPs. If you're just running a single IP address on the DNS, you definitely just want to run a single load balancer as well. So I think that was the question.
There's some people I know who like, the other thing is basically because your load balancer is on one host, so you're kind of tied to that one IP. So what happens is I know some people, especially when you're playing with Rancher, you might like tear down that host and then say the load balancers get rescheduled to a different host because, you removed that host from Rancher. A lot of people were saying, well, what's going to happen since you're tying it, directly to that IP, then how can I resolve to it point to another one? And so we've just recently introduced basically using Amazon Route 53, a DNS service to allow you so that you could set it up so that you could get an FQDN to use and be able to just point to that, and that would just pick whatever load balancers. It actually does, we could do it for all services, where any service that has a port exposed, you could just go to the FQDN and it will automatically point to any of those containers, whereas if you make changes, and then when you make changes in Rancher, you don't actually have to make any changes, say, to your DNS setup to repoint your DNS to a different IP. It would automatically just fix the FQDN record, which be updated in Amazon Route 53. So that is a service we just added. Let me just go through. I know we're getting close to time. So here, say your thing was running, and then in the catalog is really just services that are in. We have this repository under Rancher. I think it's Rancher/Rancher catalog service, which has all these templates in there, so you can always take a look. And as we add in new versions, you could get a more updated version, and we, once I said, it would show that an upgrade is available. You can click on upgrade. You can choose which version. So say I didn't upgrade for a long time and there are multiple versions, I could pick that. There's obviously only one to upgrade. You can save it. And then you can see that it's automatically it's starting to upgrade my service based on those changes. Now what will happen is after it's finished upgrading my service, your stack will now be in an upgraded state. There's your stacker service. I can't remember quite off the top of my head. And then what you need to do is basically confirm that you would upgrade, you would test all your things to make sure everything's working as you expect it to do. And then the next step would be to confirm that your upgrade has been complete. And that kind of allows Rancher to release kind of I'd say we're saving onto the old version of what you've done previously, just in case something doesn't work and you want to roll back to the previous version. So that just confirms your upgrade and allows it to keep working as is, as expected. So that's kind of the neat thing about service. So I don't know, I know we're getting close to time. I can show real quick in Route 53 to be able to use it, our Rancher service of it. You would pick a version. The configuration options is, we are using Amazon Route 53, so you'd have to provide your access key, secret key, your region, and your zone, and then basically you'll get an FQDN for every service that has a port. If you want to read more about it under the documentation, under Rancher services, DNS service, we kind of talk about what our best practice is and how to use it, and you could set it up yourself and check it out. It's pretty cool. It's just added in this week, as I said. Let's see if my stack here, upgraded, still upgrading. So you can see the different stacks. I think this is the next one to finish upgrading, and then in the options of your stack, right now it says cancel upgrade, so you could stop in the middle, but there'll eventually be either confirm upgrade and then maybe roll back is the option of which way you want to go after your upgrade has been completed. So now we're in that upgraded state that I was talking about. So you can finish your upgrade, which is saying everything looks good, or you can roll back to your other version. Just finish it, and then everything gets into an active state. And then here you can see that it now knows that it's up to date. So that's all I have to demo today. I know we have 3 minutes, so I don't know if there are any other questions or if there are any other features specifically that people want to sum up. For what I would recommend for users, at least, the documentation is pretty great. There are some services I didn't cover. There's a metadata service of how to get, if you're writing scripts, then you want to be able to get data on containers inside a container, how you could do that. There's our DNS service. The other big one is these labels that we have in Rancher that you can, basically anything in the UI or the API you can do. We have almost, an equivalent label in Rancher Compose that can be used. And so there are a lot of things that people have asked how to do, and we've created labels so that they could be able to do it. One thing to know that, always comes up is for an image, when you run a service, if the image is already cached on your host, it's not going to, go look for a newer version of it. It's just going to use that one. It doesn't automatically do a Docker pull every time. So there is a label out there that would allow you so that every time you run a new container, it would do a Docker pull on that onto your host so that you always get the latest version. If for some reason you're using the tag latest. We're going to add in options for a couple of these that are missing in the UI right now in terms of making it easier than just using these labels. Another cool one that we've just added is probably selector links, where basically usually in the UI what you need to do is when you want to link services, your services have to be created to be able to link it. So now you could create these selector links, which basically would allow you to say if later a service starts with a specific label, that service should be linked to my existing service. So if service A has a selector link of I want to label foobar, then if I started service B with a foobar label, those two services would end up getting linked automatically. You can read more details kind of about, I don't know if I did a great explanation on it under this label section. Oh, upgrading Rancher, that's probably the next step that needs to be covered. So, as Shannon mentioned earlier, we tend to release once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks of Rancher, and so, we always encourage, because we are adding in new features, we're always fixing bugs of how to upgrade. So upgrading kind of depends on how you started your Rancher server instance to begin with, but if you're just playing around with it and you just did the simple installation, all you need to do is stop the container. You end up creating basically a data container, a Rancher data container. And the reason why you create this container is because when we first started Rancher server, we started it with a restart always flag. And if your host went down and then came back up, your older version of Rancher server would end up starting immediately, and you actually wouldn't be able to start your other ones since you're always exposing the same port. You would download the most recent version of Rancher server, and then essentially you start it up from the Rancher data container. And finally, you want to remove that old version of the container just in case your host does get restarted. There's some other notes, if you upgrade it a different way. One of the great things about Rancher is that, we've tied Rancher server to specific Rancher agent versions. So if the Rancher agent version ever gets upgraded and you upgrade your setup, then we automatically figure that out, upgrade your Rancher agent on your host so that there are no issues between Rancher server and the Rancher agent communication. Okay, Shannon, that's about, I know I've started to go over, I think.
Awesome. Very helpful. There was one last question that sort of came in right just a second ago, and it was about making a server with a database and deploying it onto multiple hosts. Let me see if I can just kind of go through this real quickly. It was asking about creating multiple app server containers. What should I do with the database? If I create 2 containers, they will have different storages. So the question is, like, if I'm deploying an application and I'll have a database tier, how should I deploy the database for redundancy? I think is the question, if I'm not mistaken. And the answer on that is when you're deploying a database, you can do a couple different things. You can deploy a database as a service in the container stack. So we showed the Ghost deployment, the idea of multiple services. One of those services could be the database, and in that case, you'd probably run a single database with a volume backing that up, and that volume could be coming from from the local machine, or it could be coming from an external data store. But in that case, you'd be running sort of the database itself would be a container that if it failed, you'd need to restart. So you'd want to do set up monitoring and HA on that, and automatically restart it and reconnect to the data back end. Very often what people do is they also look at using things that are mirrored databases, or databases that support clustering. So you can use obviously some of the NoSQL type databases like Couchbase or MongoDB as a distributed database that can be shared across multiple containers and hosts and handle failure. Or you can also look at services like there are SQL databases that can also be clustered. I think Postgres has some, and there's a few others. But if your goal is to use sort of multiple hosts to process the database request, like you want to spread that database power out, and you haven't chosen a database service yet, then I would definitely look at sort of some of the NoSQL databases that would make that very easy. If you've already, if you have to run it in SQL, then there's some good SQL databases that can be clustered and can handle distributing that load. One of them that we've used in the past is called, I'm trying to remember the name of it. Denise, do you remember the name of the database that we've sometimes used, an implementation of SQL that is distributed?
Oh,
sorry?
Distributed? I'm not sure.
Give me a second, I'll tell you.
I was going to say, are you talking about MariaDB? But I don't know. I just know it's just a MySQL.
No, not specifically. I was thinking of, the one I was thinking of is called, I'll tell you in just a second. I've got it right here. Percona DB. So Percona XtraDB, you can deploy as a cluster, and it will run on a couple different nodes. So that's one that we've used. In fact, if you Google it, there's a blog on our there's a post on our blog about how to deploy, say, WordPress with a Percona DB backend, or Magento with Percona DB backend, something like that. That gives you, quite a bit of information. So those are all good options. And you definitely, the database itself, though, needs to be clusterable. So most databases, like if you just deploy MySQL, depending on, you have to configure the database itself to be clusterable. Rancher doesn't solve that problem by yourself. So if you're, the question of how to deploy the database as a cluster is sort of an application architecture deployment question. Rancher can handle deploying the cluster and making sure that all of the nodes that talk to the cluster can find all the other nodes and things like service discovery, but at the end of the day, you need to choose a DB that can be clustered if you're going to distribute it across multiple hosts, for sure. Okay, I think that was the last question. Guys, thanks everyone for attending. Denise, thanks for the excellent demonstration as always, and showing us how to do all these cool things. And we'll record this session and post it to YouTube. So if you get lost and you want to come back and take a look again, just visit our Rancher YouTube channel, and you should be able to find everything. Thanks again to everyone who attended, and Denise, thanks for all your time.
Thank you. Thanks,
guys. Have a great day.